I stood in the freezing March rain outside my own house in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and watched another man sit in my chair at the head of my table and give a speech about how much he missed me. I had been out of prison for 6 hours, 4 years for a crime I did not commit, and I came home the way a man comes home, without calling ahead, because I wanted to see my family's faces before they had time to arrange them. So I walked up the side of the house through the wet cedars, the way I used to walk the perimeter of a job site, and I looked in through the big dining room window, and there they all were, warm and golden behind the glass. My son-in-law Derek was standing at the head of my table, raising a glass. My wife Susan sat to his right, dabbing her eyes. And Derek was telling my family, in a voice thick with practiced sorrow, that Walt gave everything to this firm, that Walt would want us to move forward, that we honor Walt best by carrying on. He said my name the way you say the name of a dead man, and I was standing 3 feet away, on the wrong side of the glass, very much alive. Then he lifted his glass higher and said one more name. He said, "And let us not forget Miguel, and let us keep his family in our hearts." And he lowered his head like a mourner. Miguel Reyes was the young man who died when that parking structure came down. 26 years old, 2 little girls. And the man raising a glass to Miguel's memory in my dining room was the man who actually killed him, with a pen, on a drawing, 2 years before I ever saw the inside of a cell. I did not break the glass. I want you to understand that, because everything after depends on it. I had spent 4 years learning that a document expert does not argue. A document expert lays the real page next to the forged one and lets the room go quiet on its own. I am glad you are here. Before I go on, do me one favor. Tap subscribe and put the name of your city in the comments, because I like knowing how far the truth can travel. Now let me back up and tell it in order, the way an honest record should be told. My name is Walter Brennan. I am 68 years old, and before any of this, I spent 40 years as a forensic document examiner. I read handwriting for a living, contested wills, forged checks, ransom notes, insurance fraud. I sat in the witness chair in courtrooms across this state and taught juries a simple truth. People lie, pens do not. Put enough magnification on a signature, and you can see the exact moment a stranger's hand tried to be somebody else's. Late in my career, I started my own firm, Brennan Structural, because my other love was building. We designed parking decks, pedestrian bridges, the small, strong things a city leans on without ever looking at them. And on every set of drawings that left my office, there was a professional engineer stamp, my license number pressed into the paper. If you have ever wondered what that little seal on a building permit means, I will tell you. It means a real person put their name and their freedom behind that structure. It is not decoration. It is a promise made in ink. Remember that. It is the whole spine of this story. My daughter Rachel ran the office with me. She was a better engineer than I ever was, and she used to say one thing to every young hire that I have never forgotten. A bridge does not care whose name is on it. A bridge only cares who told the truth. Rachel passed 3 years ago. Cancer, fast and unfair. She left behind her husband Derek, my structural vice president, and her adopted son Cody, who was 18 then and is 21 now, studying engineering, carrying his grandfather's old drafting compass around in his backpack like a good luck charm. After Rachel died, I leaned on Derek the way you lean on the last piece of your child left in the world. That was my mistake. I have had 4 years to name it, and that is the name. The parking structure came down on a cold morning in the fall of 2020. A support column failed during the final pour, and a section of deck collapsed, and Miguel Reyes was underneath it. The investigation found that the as-built structure had far less steel reinforcement and a weaker concrete mix than the design required. And the design, the stamped and sealed design that called for the correct materials, had been altered. Somebody had gone into the approved drawings and quietly reduced the specifications to something cheaper and deadly. And on the altered set was my stamp, my license number, and a signature that looked like mine. I told them it was not my signature. I, of all people, told a courtroom that a signature was forged. And do you appreciate the cruelty of it? The one man in that building who could prove a forgery was the man being framed with one, and no one believed the expert crying forgery about his own name. My own lawyer at the time was tired and underpaid. The prosecutor had a dead father of 2 and a stamp with my number on it. I took 4 years for involuntary manslaughter and criminal negligence, and I lost my license, and I lost my name, which for a man who spent his life defending names is a particular kind of death. Susan filed the paperwork to move our assets while I was inside. For my protection, she said. Derek ran the firm, and now I stood in the rain watching him toast my memory in my house. I did not knock that night. I went and found a cheap, extended-stay motel off Gratiot Avenue, and I lay on a hard bed listening to the ice on the window, and I made myself one promise: not revenge. I promised myself I would prove the one thing I had been screaming into a void for 4 years, that the pen lied, and that I could read exactly whose hand held it. The next morning I did the thing that 4 decades of my profession had trained me to do, and I want you to notice that I did it in daylight, at a public counter, with nothing to hide. I drove to the county building department, and I filled out a request, and I asked for the permit file on that parking structure. Anyone can do this. Building permit records are public. The stamped drawings a city approves are sitting in a file with your tax dollars keeping the lights on over them. It took a clerk 20 minutes to pull the roll. I laid the approved drawings out on a wide table by the window, and I took my loupe out of my coat pocket, the same folding magnifier I have carried for 40 years, and I bent over that signature block, and I looked at my own name for the first time since a bailiff took my belt. Friends, I knew inside of a minute. The forger was good, but he was an engineer, not a document man, and engineers have a tell. They are trained to be consistent, and consistency is the enemy of a good forgery, because a real signature is never twice the same. This signature was too even. The pen never hesitated where mine hesitates, at the second R in Brennan, where an old hand injury makes me pause every single time. And in the corner of the altered structural sheet, initialing the revision, was a small quick set of letters, DV. Derek always initialed his changes. He initialed everything. It was a nervous habit I had teased him about for years, and there it sat, on the revision that killed a man, a set of initials the prosecution had never thought to question, because the man who would question them was in a cell. But my read was not proof. Not yet. I needed the original, the unaltered design, the one that called for the right steel and the right concrete, the way I actually drew it. And I did not have to break into anywhere to get it, which is the part of this story I am proudest of. The original came to me. Her name was Priya Raman, a young engineer Rachel had hired and mentored before she died. Priya found out I was out, and she called the motel, and we met in a diner, and she slid a flash drive across the table with a hand that was shaking. I kept the original drawing set, she said. The night of the collapse, before anyone locked the servers, I backed up the real files, because something felt wrong and I did not know who to trust. She looked at me with Rachel's kind of steadiness. Your daughter taught me something, Mr. Brennan. She said a bridge does not care whose name is on it. It only cares who told the truth. I have been carrying the truth on a drive in my sock drawer for 4 years, waiting for somebody who could use it. I could have wept in that diner. Instead, I asked her one professional question. Priya, did you keep the metadata, the dates? And she smiled, because she is a good engineer. And she said, every file, time-stamped, and the altered revision is dated 3 weeks after you were pulled off the project and reassigned. Which meant, in plain English, that the deadly change was made after I was already gone from that job. The forgery had a birthday, and I had an alibi for it. Now I had a hand, and initials, and a date. Next, I needed the why, and the why came from the last person I expected, at a coffee shop near the firm, from my own grandson. I met Cody for breakfast and played the tired old man, because I did not want him tangled in it before I understood where he stood. He was gentle with me, awkward, guilty in the way good young people are guilty for things that are not their fault. And when I asked him softly how the firm had survived those hard years after Rachel died and after my trial, he said something that stopped my fork in the air. He said Derek had set up a trust to protect the family, that Derek told him it would all be his one day, that Derek kept saying the money was handled, and then Cody frowned and said a thing he did not understand the weight of. He said, the weird part is Derek keeps talking about my inheritance, but the lawyer told him last month I might not qualify for the trust because of the adoption, something about bloodline language in the paperwork. I kept my face still. The way you keep your face still when the whole picture finally develops. But inside, two things landed at once. Derek had been moving money into a protected trust, which meant Derek had money to protect, which meant somebody had skimmed a fortune off a job by buying cheaper materials than the drawings required. And Derek had written that trust to pass by bloodline, to lock everyone else out and keep it in his own name and his own future children, never imagining it would trip over the one fact he found inconvenient. That Cody, the boy Rachel adopted and loved with her whole heart, did not share a drop of Derek's blood, and so the greedy little wall Derek built to keep everyone out had accidentally kept Cody safe on the other side of it. I went to see a lawyer that afternoon, and not a tired one this time. Ed Kowalczyk had squared off against me in courtrooms for 30 years, always the other side's expert wrangler, and he respected me the way you respect a man who never once shaded a finding for the side that paid him. I laid it all on his desk. The public drawings, Priya's original files, the dates, the initials. Ed read for a long time without a word, the way serious men read. Then he took off his glasses and said the sentence I had spent 4 years starving to hear a lawyer say. Signatures do not lie, Walt. Pens do. You spent your whole life teaching courtrooms that. Now it is the court's turn to hear it back. Ed did what I could not. He got a subpoena for the firm's financial records and the material invoices on that job. And the paper told the rest of it cold. Derek had lost a major bid the year before the collapse and was $800,000 underwater with the bank. He had made it up the only way a desperate man with a stamp can. He altered the structural drawings to call for less steel and a cheaper concrete mix, pocketed the difference on the materials, around $600,000, and forged the seal of the one engineer respected enough that no inspector would look twice, me. And when the underbuilt column failed and Miguel Reyes died, Derek did the second desperate thing. He made sure the altered set with my forged stamp was the version the investigators found, and he let the expert, who could have saved himself, go to prison, because a convicted man cannot testify about a forgery from a cell. There was one more piece, and it was the cleanest of all. Ed pulled our firm's original operating agreement, the one I wrote myself 30 years ago when Brennan Structural was 2 people and a drafting table. In it was a clause I had insisted on back when I was young and careful, because I had already seen what happens when a stamp is treated as a rubber toy instead of a sworn oath. The clause said, in plain language, that any principal engineer who knowingly falsified a sealed structural document forfeited every ownership interest and every asset derived from the firm, which passed instead to the wronged parties. Derek had rebranded, redecorated, and rewritten a great deal in 4 years. He had never bothered to dissolve the founding agreement. The trap I set 30 years ago to protect the public was still armed, and Derek was standing on the plate. Ed made one phone call I could not have made myself. He called a federal investigator named Dana Osei, because a federally funded project was involved, and Dana had quietly doubted the tidiness of my case for years. When Ed walked her through Priya's time-stamped originals in the forged seal on a federal job, she did not hesitate. Falsifying sealed engineering documents on a federally funded structure is a serious crime, and she said she had wanted to make one wrong thing right for a long time. Everything was loaded. And then Derek, God bless his vanity, built me a stage. The firm had won the contract for a new federal pedestrian bridge over the interstate, and Derek scheduled a ribbon cutting for the middle of June, with a state senator, the city engineer, and the local press. The real purpose was, underneath the ribbon though, Derek was going to use that podium to introduce Cody to the industry as the future of the firm, the grieving family carrying on. A beautiful photograph of continuity. He was going to stand on a bridge and talk about trust and legacy in front of every person whose opinion he wanted. I put on the one good suit I owned, and I put my loupe in the breast pocket, and Ed and Dana and 2 more agents came with me, and we drove out to the bridge. If this story has hold of you the way that morning had hold of me, take 1 second, tap subscribe, and stay close, because everything I waited 4 years for happens in the next few minutes. It was a bright June morning over the interstate. A red ribbon, folding chairs, a podium, 40 people in good coats. Derek stood up there in a suit that cost more than Miguel Reyes made in a month, and he began his speech about trust and legacy and the strength of family through hard times. Susan sat in the front row. Cody stood off to the side, uncomfortable in a tie, my daughter's boy. I walked up the center aisle, and Derek saw me, and the blood left his face the way it leaves a document when you hold it to the right light. But Derek was always a performer, so the shock became a smile, and he said into the microphone, "Folks, what a moment. My father-in-law Walt is here. Welcome home, Walt." I climbed the 2 steps to that podium, and I did not raise my voice, and I said the first thing, "Derek, I have spent 4 years wanting to ask you one question in a room full of people. What color is the ink you signed my name in?" The senator stopped smiling. Derek said, "Walt, this is not the place. You have been through so much." And Susan half rose and said the thing she always says, "Walt, we have to be realistic. Be realistic." My 4 years for their $600,000. I reached into my breast pocket and I took out my loupe, and I held it up so the sun caught it, and I said the second thing. To the crowd this time, not to him. For 40 years I read signatures for the courts of this state. Today I am going to read one more, and it is mine. Priya was at the back by the audiovisual table, because Ed thinks of everything, and the screen behind the podium lit up. On the left, the original drawing, my real stamp, my real signature, the correct steel, the correct mix, dated and true. On the right, the altered set that killed a man, dated 3 weeks after I left that job, my name traced too evenly by a careful engineer's hand, and in the corner, initialing the revision, small and quick, the letters DV. I put the loupe to the screen, and I walked that crowd through it the way I once walked juries through it. The hesitation that was not there, the pressure that was wrong, the initials that were his, and the date that was after I was gone. And then I said the last thing, quiet, right into the microphone so it carried. There is a name that belongs in this ceremony that nobody wants to say out loud, Miguel Reyes. He is the reason a stamp is a promise, and not a decoration. He died under $600,000 of savings, and the man who signed my name to save that money is standing next to me. The bridge went silent, and Dana Ose stepped up onto that platform with 2 agents, and she did not shout either. She just showed Derek her badge and told him he was under arrest for forgery, fraud, and falsifying sealed documents on a federal structure, and the sound of the cuffs closing carried over the microphone across every folding chair. Susan came up the steps then, not to me, past me, screaming that I was destroying the family, and an agent caught her arm gently, and I looked at her and I said the only thing I had left for her. "Susan, we stopped being a family the day you signed the papers to move my house while I sat in a cell for something you knew I did not do. You did not lose a family today. You lost an arrangement. The rest went the way honest paperwork goes." Derek was convicted in the fall. The judge did not have much room, given a dead father of 2, and Derek is serving a long sentence now, longer than mine, in a harder place. The federal charges took the money, and the operating agreement I wrote 30 years ago took the rest. Susan walked out of the settlement with what the law required, and not $1 more, because the poison in the well was hers too, and she is in a small apartment now learning what realistic actually costs. My conviction was vacated. A judge read the word forgery into the record about my own signature, and this time the whole room believed the expert, and I sat in that courtroom and finally let myself cry, 4 years late. And here are the 3 pictures I will leave you with, because they are the real end of this. The first is my dining room table in Grosse Pointe, a year later set for a full house, and the chair at the head of it is mine again, and nobody gives a speech about a dead man because the man is right there passing the potatoes. Priya is at that table. So is half the young talent Rachel ever hired. The firm rebuilt around them, honest and small and strong, the way the small, strong things are supposed to be. The second is a framed drawing on my office wall. The original set. The true one. My real stamp. My real set. Signature. And in the corner, in Rachel's old hand, that line she said to every young engineer who ever walked through our door. A bridge does not care whose name is on it. It only cares who told the truth. My loupe hangs on a little hook beside the frame, retired at last, its work finally finished. And the third picture is my grandson. Cody found out that summer that the bloodline Derek wrote into his greedy trust, the wall built to keep everyone out, was the very thing that kept the dirty money from ever touching him. He was never Derek's blood. He was Rachel's boy by choice, which is the only kind of family that was ever real in this story. He passed his engineering exams this spring, and he asked me quietly if he could take the name Brennan and put it on his own license someday, and press his own stamp into his own paper. His new diploma hangs next to the frame drawing now. Blood did not build one honest thing in this whole account. A truthful signature built all of it. So here is what an old document man will leave you with, and I will say the practical part twice, because things said twice get remembered. That little stamp on a permit, that signature at the bottom of a page, is a real person putting their name behind your safety. It is a promise made in ink, so treat it like one, and if something in your life has been signed in a hand you do not trust, go find the original, because the record is public, and the truth is patient. People lie, pens lie, but the original page is still out there in a file somewhere, waiting for somebody honest to lay it in the light. And one more thing, from Rachel, through me, to you. A bridge does not care whose name is on it. It only cares who told the truth. So does a family. If this story reminded you of somebody, share it with them tonight. Tell me your city in the comments so I know how far we traveled together. And if you want more true-to-life stories about family, patience, and justice that arrives late but arrives, subscribe and join me for the next one. Take care of each other and mind whose name you sign.